We will be analysing fashion choices of female university students in Singapore as well as in Japan. So let me start with the introduction. So let me start with the content page. So we'll be starting with our introduction, where we'll be defining our research statement, followed by our research methodology, our key findings, where we compare female students' behaviour in Japan and in Singapore, finally our implications, and then our Q&A. So our research question focuses on studying group culture as represented by the fashion choices of female university students in Singapore versus the students in Japan. And let me start by breaking down the key terms from our research question. With regards to group culture, we will look at the differences between individualistic versus collective cultures and the importance of homogeneity within social circles. Fashion choices are viewed as the end-to-end process of fashion influence, shopping, outfit construction, and external validation derived from the choices made. Our chosen target group were university students, as they had greater liberty to choose what they wanted to wear, especially since prior to university, most students both in Singapore and in Japan had to wear school uniforms to school. University students also have higher spending capabilities as they currently reside in the city. Since we're studying students from Tokyo and in Singapore, they will have greater exposure to many clothing retailers as well as to different fashion trends, and this could in turn lead to greater fashion diversity. So, our research included conducting semi-structured interviews with 4 Japanese students and 4 Singaporean university students as part of a focus group discussion. And through this focus group discussion, we learned more about the shopping habits as well as the brands that they frequent. We then did our field work at these brands and districts that were popular with these students. The Japanese students who had helped us with our research went to Shinjuku and Harajuku as part of their fieldwork, but the 3 of us went to Orchard Road, as many of the brands that Singaporean students frequent could be found there. And these were the research questions that we asked the students. So firstly, what do you wear to school? Do you lean towards more formal wear or more casual wear? How much do you usually spend on clothing each month? How do you decide what to wear? Is matching clothes popular for you? What brands of clothes do you buy? What do you wear to school? What kinds of clothes do you buy? What is the price range of the clothes that you usually buy? Does your Instagram account or your social media account reflect how you dress in real life? And do students dress differently based on your faculty? So let's look at the data that we have found from our research. So both Japanese and Singaporean students claimed that they dress casually for school. 3 of the Japanese students that we interviewed cited that they spend between 5,000 to 15,000 yen on clothes each month, while one cited that they spend more than 15,000 yen each month on clothes. On the other hand, 3 of the Singaporean students we interviewed cited spending less than $50 each month on clothes, while one cited spending between $50 to $150 on clothes each month. Half of the Japanese students we interviewed stated that the clothes they wore in their day-to-day lives reflected the pictures they posted on their social media accounts, while 3 of the Singaporean university students who were interviewed stated that the clothes they wore in their day-to-day life reflected the pictures they posted on their social media accounts. So after comparing the data we collected between the Singaporean students and the Japanese students, we came to the following conclusions. Firstly, Singaporean university students shop online much more than Japanese university students. This is due to the increasing usage of online sites such as Taobao, Lazada, ASOS, Zalora, and other local blog shops. Secondly, the definition of casual differs across both countries. While both groups of interviewees mentioned that they dress casually, in Japan, casual refers to denim, simple knits, whereas Singapore it refers to t-shirts, blouse, and shorts. Thirdly, Japanese students were willing to spend much more money on clothes as compared to their Singaporean counterparts. The Singaporean interviewee stated that the clothes usually cost around $20 to $60 per piece, while the Japanese interviewee stated that the clothes usually cost around $40 to $100 per piece. Now Rebecca will be taking us through our research limitations and fieldwork.
So before moving on to our fieldwork, just wanted to share our research limitations. So we have identified 4 research limitations. First would be our small participant pool. So we could only reach out to 4 Japanese students and have 4 Singaporean students to match their Japanese counterparts. So our sample size was extremely small. So our findings is not very representative of Singapore or Tokyo. So secondly, our finding does not really account for the dynamism of fashion habits. In other words, this study assumes that university students their shopping habits and their interest in fashion remains the same all year round, which is clearly not the case. So thirdly will be the language barrier. So it's very difficult to translate what the Japanese students are saying sometimes due to the language barriers. And at the same time, because our study was mostly qualitative, the Japanese students couldn't really elaborate as much as they would like to because they are restrained by the fact that they can only speak Japanese and they can't really elaborate in English as well. So our last limitation would be the fact that there were weather restrictions due to the fact that during the time that we conducted this study, it was winter in Japan, so there might be recency bias, as the Japanese students might be answering based on their fashion shopping habits in winter and not really all year round. So to move on to our fieldwork, to find out more, we did some fieldwork in Singapore and Japan, as Natalie mentioned, based on the popular brands that our interviewees mentioned. So in Singapore, we went to H&M, Love Benito, Editor's Market, Zara, and Playdress. Across the stores, there was diversity in the clothing style and types of people in the stores. So Love Benito, Playdress, and Editor's Market was more reflective of blog shop fashion, and university students mostly went there to buy fancier clothing. In contrast, H&M and Zara was more casual, and they had more basics like sweaters, shorts, and plain t-shirts. So moving on, for Tokyo, our group mates went to the stores that were popular among the female university students that they interviewed. So they went to the Harajuku and Shinjuku outlets and went to check out Hare, Nico-en, GU, Castaigne, and 179WG. So overall, the clothing sold in these shops were mostly similar, and they mostly aligned with fashion trends that were currently popular in Japan at the time. So after our fieldwork, our group then moved on to conduct a more in-depth analysis of the data that we collected from our 8 interviewees. Our key findings can be split into the 4 aspects on the screen. So to move on to our first finding, the first section of our key findings, we wanted to find out why university students dress the way that they do. In other words, how do they know what to wear? For female university students in Japan, they are more focused on following trends in order to stay fashionable, and they do this by purchasing fashion magazines such as Fudge, Vivi, and Nonno, which keeps them updated on the current season's latest fashionable items and wardrobes. They also even have a mobile app dedicated to keep young people in Japan updated with current trends, even giving them ideas on how to coordinate their outfits for everyday wear. As such, fashion among university students in Japan tend to be quite similar, as most of them get inspirations from the same sources and tend to follow said trends very closely. In contrast, our Singapore university students are less fixated on current trends or fashionable outfits. Although they do take inspiration from certain influencers on Instagram, they prefer having the freedom to express their own fashion sense by picking out what they want to wear, rather than following trends. As such, they tend to prefer shopping for clothes that catch their eye while window shopping, which results in more diverse sense of fashion. So moving on to our next key finding, we noticed that even though most students in Japan dress similarly, there are still some distinctions among certain groups. So for example, our Japanese interviewees actually noted that female university students are known to dress differently according to the different universities that they go to, due to the different images of their home university. For example, female university students at Meiji dress in a more masculine style, wearing slacks and dressing in black or brown, due to the fact that Meiji University is seen as a more powerful university. In contrast, female students at Rikyo University dress in a more feminine style, wearing skirts and dressing in more feminine colors, as they have a more elegant and cute image. Interestingly, this suggests that to a certain extent, female university students dress according to what is expected of them, and they tend to match their school image, suggesting that the idea of a group identity is rather important to them. However, it's also important to note that this idea is not actually rooted in any facts and no study has been conducted. It is only based on what we heard from the Japanese students, and might simply be a perception that the students have rather than an actual distinction. So as we felt that this is a very interesting point and a very interesting observation, we decided to find out why this could be the case. So upon further research, we realized that this difference in perception between the two schools could be attributed to the gender distribution. For example, according to the data on Rikyo University's webpage, there is a rather even distribution in the number of male to female students across the school. In contrast, the distribution of gender in Meiji University is much different, with 30,000 male undergraduate students compared to 10,000 female undergraduate students. This might have resulted in the difference in how female university students dress in both universities, as the group norm in both universities are much different. So moving on to university students in Singapore, students tend to dress rather differently even within the same university, as noted by our Singapore interviewees. For example, our interviewees reported that students from different faculties are known to dress differently, where students from faculties such as arts and business are known to dress up more, wearing slacks, blouses, and covered shoes, while their STEM faculty counterparts tend to dress down more often. It is also interesting to note that while university students in Japan are largely influenced by local trends and mostly shop from local brands, Singapore, on the other hand, takes inspiration from a variety of cultures and countries. For local trends, we have blog-shop fashion style, which can be seen in shops like Love Bonito and Editor's Market, while foreign trends include Western influences from well-known celebrities such as the Kardashians and influencers like Emma Chamberlain. So now Samantha will go on to cover the rest of our key findings.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So Japanese students have actually a pretty unique social media habits in comparison with Singaporean students. So for example, we can commonly see both female and male students post like group shots with friends on Instagram, with the whole group like decked out in coordinated outfits. According to our participants, this matching of clothes is usually done with the intention to take photos and post them later. So this is done particularly for like special occasions, like when they go to Disneyland together. Their feeds also tend to be very curated with clear setups and color palettes that they like to stick to. Group shots are also more common among Japanese students, with solo pics being rarer. So the photos they post also tend to fit in with what is in trend in the season. So, there's no like slipper and t-shirt photos that they post during the winter months. So, from our research pool, Singaporean students appear more likely to post photos of themselves on a casual basis, with greater focus on the visual aesthetic of the image rather than the reason for posting, being a special occasion or special place they want to show off. So this translates to a more relaxed and casual posting schedule for most Singaporeans. There's also a lower tendency to post outfits that are seasonally in trend as well, largely due to the average Singaporean being less keen on closely following commercial trends. So in addition to this, there are several notable differences between physical stores in Tokyo and Singapore. The outlets visited by our team in Japan were located in the shopping districts of Harajuku and Shinjuku, and were largely brick-and-mortar stores and shops in malls. Despite both teams visiting high-traffic shopping districts, the stores visited in Tokyo appear to have considerably less space. So also noted by our Japanese peers was that Japanese stores were also less decorative compared to stores in Singapore, with the layouts being very functional, and storefronts were also very monochromatic, and they used a lot of muted colors, similar to the type of clothing that Japanese students seem to prefer. Meanwhile, in Singapore, interior design and shop ambience are made more apparent in physical stores, with places like Playdress having dedicated areas for customer comfort. So for example, this sitting area in the back of the store near the fitting rooms with a wall for taking photos, as well as numerous benches outside stores and around malls for boyfriends to wait for their girlfriends to be done shopping. So these are actually pretty heavily utilized areas as the photos show. The stores also tend to be outfitted with flashier decor from neon signage to brightly colored walls, as well as lifestyle sections that sell stationery and everyday items. So here are some possible implications and issues our team had initially considered based on our research findings, as well as more possible areas of study, namely seasonal habits, neon-genron, group validation, and gender. Since our presentation in December, our team has been able to explore these areas at a greater depth. So out of these 4 areas, we actually made the decision to only draw focus on neon-genron, group validation, and gender. So this was largely because making accurate comparisons between Singapore and Japan based on seasonal habits would be difficult, given Singapore's climate that remains pretty much the same all year round, compared to Japan, which enjoys all 4 seasons from summer to winter. So with this, Rebecca will explain a little more on how we can tie the concept of neon-genron into our existing research.
So moving on to our first implication of our study is the idea of neon-genron, which is the idea that Japan tends to emphasize on homogeneity and the uniqueness of Japanese culture. It is an idea that is deeply rooted in nationalism and is often attributed to the idea that Japan is a rather mono-ethnic society. Neon-genron discusses the shared identity of Japanese people, resulting in little deviation from the group, and similarities among the group are valued. Individualism is also sometimes viewed as a more Western concept and is sometimes frowned upon. Neon-genron also includes the idea that Japanese people feel a sense of duty to maintain the unity of their nation, and deviations might be viewed as a threat to their national identity. Hence, this idea might be one of the factors contributing to the idea and tendency for Japanese students to focus on following trends and not stand out from the rest, as wanting to deviate from trends and norms might result in one being seen as going against the unity that's so valued by Japan. So moving on to group validation.
For group validation, our team wanted to highlight to what degree being considered well-dressed or presentable in different groups mattered to Japan and Singapore, by looking at how external judgment and validation plays out in regards to self-identity. So for one, cultural expectations differ pretty heavily between the two countries. The connotation of casual in Singapore could constitute like flip-flops and t-shirt and shorts, something easy to move around in and practical. However, casual in Japan usually means covered shoes, matching top and bottoms, with casual meaning nondescript. So there's no universal casual in that sense, and individuals typically dress casually in the way that their country means it. So secondly, community feedback and validation was interesting to look at as well. Community-enforced behavior is pretty different between Singapore and Tokyo. So criticism of your peers is not uncommon here in Singapore. For example, calling your friend who came to hang out with you like lapsap, whether as a joke or like actually meaning it. So it's pretty common for people to voice their opinions on social media as well. One example would be this local TikToker who made a TikTok on a list of ways that Singaporean men could make themselves more attractive to Singaporean girls, basically dissing men who wore slippers and shorts when going out. So we can compare this to the silent criticism of Tokyoites. In fact, chatting with the Meiji students helped us understand that they try to be more understanding of other circumstances or prefer being non-confrontational when there's no need to be. So, however, even though Singaporeans tend to be more vocal about their criticisms, the status quo here still tends to be less strict compared to Japan, raising the question on whether this means group culture has a weaker influence here overall. So now Natalie will talk a bit about gender.
Thank you, Samantha. So the final implication that we will be delving into is gender, specifically fashion amongst men. Several research papers and online articles highlighted the popularity of fashion magazines amongst the Japanese, especially Japanese men. These magazines cater to different lifestyles and stages of life, such as vintage styles, those transitioning from student to adulthood, and those who love the outdoors, etc., etc. Moreover, a research article even cited that Japanese men take a lot of pride in their appearance, wanting to appear sexy and attractive, desiring to attract admirers to their sense of style, and also to dress up for their own pleasure, which is similar to what we hear about women's general opinion of dressing up. The opinions of fashion in Japan among Japanese men are a stark contrast to that of Singaporean men. While there are fashion magazines catered to men in Singapore, most of these magazines cater to a similar lifestyle, the cosmopolitan lifestyle that cater to the cosmopolitan men. Moreover, magazines are generally not very popular among Singaporean men. And as compared to their Japanese counterparts, most men in Singapore do not take as much pride in their appearances, with many choosing not to experiment with different clothing brands and doing most of their shopping, as expected, at Uniqlo. As such, Japanese men tend to put in a lot more effort when it comes to fashion as compared to Singaporean men. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. Do you have any questions?